First Corinthians 9:16 through 23 is a passage that has some very well-known part, the idea of being all things to all people. And this is a passage that in many ways covers, ministry. It covers, what it is to be a minister. Paul talks a lot about commission here, what kind of the purpose of that commission is, how the sort of the reward is making the gospel free for all. But he also goes into this very practical aspect of how he at least goes about ministry, and it's something that has a lot of wisdom in it that I think all of us can take from and should take from. This idea of being all things to all people. The reason for this is, of course, even if you are not a pastor or in the path to become a pastor or doing anything specifically in ministry, we are all called by the Great Commission to go out and spread the gospel. Now, the idea here of being all things to all people, it doesn't necessarily mean that you go and you fit into a crowd and you do things that are wrong, that are sinful, to fit in with that crowd, and somehow that ends up in sort of preaching the gospel. That's not what Paul is saying here. Especially when he talks about being as one outside the law, that's not what he's saying. He does have that bit about saying, I'm still under God's law, I'm under Christ's law. But what I think Paul is really saying here is, going and making a point to get on the same level as the person you're talking to. And this is something that has been noticed by, in other fields as well, sales especially, where, if you are able to sort of be like the person you're talking to, your message is going to have a lot more effect. And this means a lot of things. A big thing is, that it means you have to harbor empathy for that person first. You have to understand where they're coming from, what is important to them, and really address that when you're talking to them or ministering to them. And this is something that I think at times we have struggled as with the church. A lot of times we think that the best way to kind of approach things and go into things is to just sort of, brute force talk about the gospel without realizing some of the other sort of things that are sort of existing underneath the surface. In many ways, I think we oftentimes, also look and say that our ministry that is, handing out food, maybe to the homeless, to those in need, or clothing or whatever, that isn't at all related to the Great Commission either. That we can't really have this sort of connection. But the truth is, and what is kind of being made as a point here, is that they are connected. This idea is that by taking care of the needs of the person, you can and you should also be, guiding them to Christ. Now, that doesn't mean that you go and you do these ministries like, our own outreach to the homeless with the idea that you're going to, hand them a bag of food and then, pull them aside and be like, you need Jesus in your life. I would encourage you not to go about it in that way. But it can lead to doors opening and opportunities opening that can allow you to speak into that person's life and change their life. And I think that is a kind of the important key to take from here. Is being willing to have empathy for those we are ministering to, and being willing to not only address their needs, but also, address their spiritual needs as well, and see that those two things are always in connection. And if we do that, we will be able to effectively accomplish the Great Commission. Amen. And now I'd like to invite you all to join me for our last worship song today.